The council chamber was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, yet the air felt heavy with tension. Leaders from dozens of star systems, creatures of unimaginable power, and fleets that could obliterate entire planets stood in uneasy silence. All of them were waiting. But for what? The room's focus was squarely on the single empty seat, the one that had been vacant for over a century. Earth's seat. It had been years since humanity had quietly withdrawn from galactic affairs, pulling its presence from the Council without explanation. The absence of Earth's representative was more than just an oversight. It was a lingering question. The galaxy had tried to move on, tried to act as though nothing had changed, but everyone knew it had. Earth had disappeared, and with it, the unpredictable force that had once been an undeniable presence. But why? The Council's members, those who had once eagerly debated with Earth's diplomats, respected their influence, now whispered among themselves. Some were eager to move forward with their agenda, brushing aside the question as inconsequential. Others, however, were nervous, unsure whether Earth's retreat was a sign of weakness or a deeper, more complex strategy. After all, humanity had once been underestimated in every corner of the galaxy, and they'd still risen to challenge every threat thrown their way. They'd never been a species to remain passive for long. The moment stretched on until a faint hum filled the room, signaling that the council session was about to begin. As the leaders took their seats and the chamber doors closed, the tension seemed to intensify. The missing seat had become a focal point, an unspoken reminder that Earth was not, in fact, gone. It was just waiting. And then the holographic message arrived. It wasn't a physical representative of Earth. There were no grand entrances or military fleets behind it. No elaborate light shows or dramatic gestures. Instead, a simple message appeared, flickering for a brief moment before stabilizing. The image of a human ambassador, standing alone, appeared before them. The voice was calm, measured, and eerily unafraid. "You've forgotten rule number 1, the message began. The words sent a ripple through the chamber. Silence. No one had expected this. No one had expected Earth to break their silence with such an ambiguous and chilling statement. What did it mean? What was rule number 1? The galaxy's leaders glanced at each other, but none dared speak. A few exchanged uncertain glances, while others looked at the empty seat as if it were mocking them. Earth had once been part of their discussions, their decisions, their disputes. Now it was a ghost, a lingering memory, a presence that wasn't truly gone. "I know you have questions," the human ambassador's voice continued, "and I know you don't understand. But what you need to realize is that Earth's absence was not weakness. It was not retreat. It was a reminder that the galaxy cannot ignore us forever. We've learned your rules. We've studied your systems. And now, we return to remind you of the most important lesson." The council members were now on edge. Some were leaning forward, eager for answers. Others seemed unsettled, unsure if they had underestimated Earth's sudden disappearance. The ambassador's tone was resolute, and the message was clear. Earth had withdrawn, but it had not forgotten. "You have forgotten rule number 1, the ambassador repeated. "The universe is not run by those who hold the most power, the most ships, the most weapons. It is run by those who know how to survive. And humanity has learned to survive in ways that no one else can." A subtle shift in the room's atmosphere took place. The galaxy's greatest minds, the power players of the known universe, were beginning to realize that Earth's absence was not some fleeting event. Earth had been biding its time, watching, and now it was speaking. But more importantly, it was reminding them all of something they had ignored for far too long. The message ended with a simple warning: "We've learned. And you will learn. Earth is not gone. Earth is waiting." The hologram flickered out, leaving behind a room full of questions, unease, and a rising sense of fear. What had Earth learned? And more importantly, what would happen when they finally returned? The council chamber was silent, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down on the beings of every race and origin. A message had just been delivered, a warning from the one place they never expected: Earth. And yet, no one knew what to make of it. The words, cold and enigmatic, had left them all with more questions than answers. "You've forgotten rule number one." Those words echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the cold stone walls and leaving the galaxy's most powerful figures in uneasy suspense. What was rule number one? The answer was hidden, locked away in an ancient human archive that only a handful of individuals knew about. To those who had encountered humanity's hidden legacy, it was more than a mere guideline. It was a threat, an unspoken truth that had been buried for centuries, ignored by the galaxy at large, and now it was coming back to haunt them. For centuries, Earth had been a distant, almost forgotten member of the galactic community, a quiet, humble planet with a population that seemed to cling to its own survival more than any grand ambition. Earth wasn't feared. No one considered it a threat. Its seat at the council had been an empty symbol for years. They had been written off, abandoned by most, relegated to the forgotten edges of galactic politics. But the message had been clear. They hadn't just stepped away. They were watching. As the council members shifted uneasily, the ancient human races within the chamber exchanged looks of wariness. They knew, perhaps better than anyone, the implications of the warning. Some had tried to leave Earth behind long ago, unable to comprehend the lengths humanity had gone to hide its true potential. The technology, the resources, the tactics. Earth had long since surpassed the galactic powers in subtle ways that no one fully understood. But that was the thing. Earth didn't need to boast. Humanity didn't need to be the loudest, the most technologically advanced, or the most militarized to win. They simply needed one thing: time. Time to adapt, time to outthink, and time to change the very rules that govern the galaxy. The council had been discussing the inevitable dissolution of a war between two powerful factions, one that had already taken too many lives and drained too many resources. For months, they'd argued over what to do, when to intervene, and who would lead the charge to broker peace. But now, the focus had shifted, as it always did when Earth entered the equation. The message was clear. They weren't interested in negotiating peace with anyone. If anything, the humans wanted the galaxy to come to terms with the fact that they were ready to take control of the narrative. Rule number one of the older, more powerful species muttered under his breath. His tone was cautious. It means humanity hasn't forgotten its power. It means they can choose when to engage and when to remain hidden. When they move for a reason. Another council member, a species known for their intellect and cold pragmatism, frowned deeply. "Are you suggesting they built something? Some new weapon? A fleet?" The words hung in the air, unspoken but felt. The idea was almost unthinkable, yet there was a quiet fear that rippled through the ranks. A fleet built by humanity could not be underestimated. For years, humanity had been quietly advancing, its technological progress almost unnoticed by the galaxy. They hadn't needed to declare war, hadn't needed to flaunt their power. They had simply bided their time. The message itself was proof enough of that, an invitation to join Earth's way of thinking, or else face the consequences. It wasn't a threat of destruction. It was a statement of fact. Earth would not play by the galaxy's rules any longer. They would rewrite them. "You've forgotten rule number one," the message had said. It wasn't a warning of a weapon or a fleet. It was a reminder that humanity had always been underestimated, ignored, and dismissed. And now, Earth was no longer willing to be anyone's punching bag or pawn. They had learned from their past mistakes, and they were ready to rewrite the future. The message wasn't a threat of what Earth had built, but what they could build together. Humanity had always believed in the power of unity. If the galaxy refused to learn that lesson, it would suffer the consequences. "Then we must prepare," a council leader declared, breaking the silence. "Prepare for the unknown. Prepare for the return of Earth." But as the council moved to strategize, one unsettling truth remained. They could never be sure if Earth's absence was an act of weakness or the quietest form of power the galaxy had ever known. They had forgotten rule number one, and now they would learn its cost. The galaxy held its breath, a silence so heavy, so thick with anticipation, it could suffocate even the most seasoned diplomat. Earth had been gone for too long, and now their absence was about to shake the very foundation of galactic politics. The message was clear. Humanity was not just returning, they were changing the game. The assassins, elite mercenaries, and spies hired by various galactic factions to uncover Earth's secrets had failed. One by one, their ships disappeared, swallowed by the unknown voids of space. Earth had always been underestimated. Its quiet, unassuming presence on the galactic stage gave no hint of the force that lay beneath. But now, that force was awakening. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a fleet. It was something much more terrifying. Humanity's adaptability, humanity's power, had always been rooted in its survival instinct. Earth didn't need the most advanced technology, nor did it require the greatest number of ships. What Earth possessed was an innate ability to survive under the harshest of conditions, to adapt, to grow. That was the key to their success. And it was something no alien species had ever fully understood. While the galaxy's greatest minds were focused on brute force, weapons, and tactics, humanity had quietly outgrown them all. They had mastered the art of evolution, not just biological, but technological, psychological, and social. It wasn't that humans were superior in one specific way. It was that they were superior at becoming better, faster, and stronger at anything they set their minds to. In the dark reaches of space, where most civilizations feared to tread, humanity had built the perfect habitat, a place where ideas could flourish, where even the most broken of humans could rise up and forge a new path. This was the true nature of Earth's hidden power, its ability to adapt, to innovate, to create from nothing. The first few fleets that attempted to infiltrate Earth's orbit were left dumbfounded. They found nothing. No weapons, no fleets, no advanced technology. What they found instead were human cities, thriving with unremarkable, by galactic standards, technology. But those who dared venture deeper soon discovered what they had missed. It wasn't the technology that mattered, it was the humans themselves. Earth had cultivated a culture of ingenuity and relentless drive. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Humanity had spent centuries developing its own way of thinking, an approach to problem-solving that was unbound by the rigid structures and bureaucracies of other civilizations. While the galaxy's other races had focused on technological superiority and military might, humans had focused on survival at any cost. This willingness to innovate, to adapt to their environment, made them more dangerous than any weapon. As a former Earth diplomat and now one of the few still alive to witness the change, I knew the truth. Earth wasn't building anything, it was evolving everything. They weren't waiting for the galaxy to catch up. They were setting the pace. The mercenary groups, the assassins, the spies, all of them had underestimated humanity's greatest asset, the will to survive. It wasn't about conquering other races, about flexing muscles. Earth had always been content to be a quiet observer. Until the galaxy's greatest mistake was made, they had assumed Earth would never stand up. Now, Earth's hidden power was a reality. No longer would humanity play by the rules of others. Earth wasn't simply returning to the galactic stage, they were redefining it. The galaxy would learn that humanity was more than capable of surviving, even thriving, in the harshest conditions. They hadn't forgotten rule number one. The galaxy had. They had forgotten what it meant to be truly adaptable. But humanity never had. And now they would see the cost of that ignorance. The room was suffocating. The tension in the council chamber had reached a breaking point. Every eye was fixed on the human ambassador, whose words had begun to dismantle everything the galaxy thought it knew. Earth was no longer the quiet, distant planet it had once been. The power it now wielded was palpable, a force greater than any weapon or fleet could hope to be. And yet, the true nature of that power remained shrouded in mystery. Until now. "You've forgotten rule number one," the ambassador repeated, her voice unwavering. She stood alone, unflinching in the face of the galaxy's leaders. "And it's time you remembered." The council's leaders exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of her words pressing down on them. The human ambassador had been speaking in riddles, referencing an ancient rule that no one truly understood. But now it seemed the time had come to reveal what had been hidden all along. The ambassador stepped forward, her presence commanding attention, and began to speak in a tone that brooked no argument. "Rule number 1 isn't a weapon," she said, her words cutting through the silence. "It's not about fleets or armies or technology. It's about humanity itself. We've survived every obstacle the galaxy has thrown at us. We've learned to adapt, to overcome, and to rebuild from nothing. That is our strength. And that is what you've forgotten." Her gaze swept over the council, each leader now acutely aware of the truth that had been staring them in the face all along. Earth's power wasn't in any one technology. It wasn't in any single advancement. It was in the collective will of humanity, the ability to persist and evolve, to face extinction and come back stronger. The room buzzed with disbelief. No one had expected this. Earth had never made a show of its strength. For centuries, it had played by the galaxy's rules, its influence barely noticeable. But now, the galaxy was seeing the fruits of that quiet resilience. Humanity had spent generations building not just technology, but a culture of survival, a culture that understood the true meaning of perseverance, of enduring against all odds. The ambassador paused, letting the words sink in. The tension in the room thickened. This wasn't the moment for negotiation. This was a statement of fact. Earth had been underestimated, and now the consequences of that oversight were clear. "You can't defeat us with firepower," she continued, her voice steady. "You can't outsmart us with strategy. You can't win with technology alone. What you failed to realize is that we are not bound by the same rules you are. When the galaxy falls, we rise. When your civilizations crumble, we rebuild." The council was reeling. Some species had spent centuries amassing power, building ships and armies capable of destroying entire star systems. But none of them had ever considered that the key to victory lay not in weapons or destruction, but in something far more difficult to contain: the human spirit. And that, the ambassador concluded, is rule number 1. Never underestimate humanity's will to survive. We are not like the rest of you. We do not need armies to conquer. We do not need fleets to win. What we have is something far more dangerous: the ability to evolve and adapt faster than any of you could ever imagine. For the first time, the council understood. Earth's power wasn't in a weapon. It wasn't in a fleet. It was in the humanity's ability to outlast, to adapt, to change the very rules the galaxy had based its existence on. And now, Earth was about to show them what that meant. In that moment, every leader, every diplomat in the room knew the truth. They had made a fatal mistake in underestimating Earth. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted. The only question that remained was whether they would adapt, or whether they would be left behind, victims of their own arrogance. Rule number 1 had been forgotten for far too long. Now, the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity decided it was no longer willing to be ignored. The galaxy was watching, but no one could predict what would happen next. The ambassador's words still echoed in the minds of every leader present, leaving them with an undeniable truth: Earth had rewritten the rules. And now, the galaxy had no choice but to follow. The fleet hovered in the distance, its ships small and unassuming, but each one was a silent reminder of Earth's quiet, unstoppable rise. The council chamber had been plunged into a tense silence after the ambassador's revelation, the leaders struggling to come to terms with the truth they had so long ignored. Humanity had never played by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. And now, that difference would define the future of the entire universe. "Do you think you can simply come in here and demand change?" One of the council leaders, a member of an ancient, proud species, spoke up, his voice filled with disbelief. "Your message has been clear, but you can't just disrupt everything. The galaxy has its order, its balance. You are one world, one species. You have no power to reshape the foundation of civilization." The human ambassador remained unshaken, her gaze unwavering. "We don't need to reshape anything. We just need to remind you that the galaxy's balance was built on the assumption that Earth would always be small, weak, irrelevant. That was your mistake. A murmur rippled through the room. The arrogance of the galaxy's most powerful species had been exposed. The assumption that Earth would never stand up for itself, that humanity would always be a passive player in a grand game they didn't fully understand, had been shattered. For centuries, the galaxy had been run by those who thought they controlled the balance of power. They built empires, amassed fleets, and declared war on each other, believing that their strength in numbers and technology would define the future. But Earth had quietly learned a different lesson. The true power lay not in control or might, but in the ability to endure, to adapt, and to survive. "We've never needed fleets to rule," the ambassador said, her voice carrying across the chamber with chilling clarity. "And we don't need your approval. You will either evolve with us, or you will be left behind. But rest assured, humanity will thrive, whether you accept it or not." For the first time, the Council understood the full scale of what was happening. The galaxy had not been facing an invading force, but a shift in the very understanding of what power meant. Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology, its ships, or its resources. It was the ability of its people to unite, to push forward even when everything seemed lost, to adapt and overcome. The rest of the galaxy had never truly understood that. They had underestimated humanity's relentless drive. The Council's leaders, now aware of the consequences of their ignorance, began to shift in their seats. They could feel it. This wasn't a negotiation. Earth wasn't asking for alliances or permission. They were demanding respect. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were here to shape the future, and the galaxy would have no choice but to follow. But there was resistance, of course. The powerful species, who had long enjoyed their dominance, weren't willing to relinquish their control without a fight. "You speak of unity and survival," one of them snarled. "But your species is no different from any other. You will falter. Your societies will crumble. And when they do, we'll be here, ready to take back what you've stolen." The ambassador didn't flinch. "That's where you're wrong. Humanity doesn't steal. We build. When your empires fall, we'll rebuild. When your people scatter, we'll unite. And when the galaxy is on the brink of collapse, it will be humanity that steps in to pick up the pieces. We've done it before, and we'll do it again." The room fell into stunned silence. There was no denying it now. Earth wasn't just a species fighting for survival. They were a species that had learned how to thrive, how to adapt to anything the universe threw their way. And now, the galaxy would learn the consequences of that lesson. In the years to come, the galaxy would look back on this moment as the turning point, the moment when humanity stood up and reshaped the future. The once empty seat of Earth at the Galactic Council would no longer be a symbol of weakness. It would be a symbol of power, a reminder that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in weapons or fleets, but in their refusal to be ignored. The ambassadors of the galaxy knew the truth now. Earth wasn't just a player in the galaxy's game. Earth was the game changer. As the Council dissolved into heated discussions, one thing was clear. A new order had been born. And it was a human order. The galaxy had forgotten rule number 1 for too long. And now, Earth was here to remind them. Humanity always survives. Always. The silence lasted only a moment, but it felt like an eternity. When the Earth fleet finally arrived at the Galactic Council, it wasn't with a roar of military might. There was no flash of weapons or blinding light from massive warships. Instead, it was quiet, eerily, so, like a shadow moving through the void of space, silent, unassuming, yet undeniable. The galaxy's greatest powers watched, holding their breath, knowing they were about to face something they could not comprehend. No one had anticipated this. For weeks, the Council had debated the significance of Earth's message, "You've forgotten rule number 1, and the mysterious fleet that had appeared out of nowhere. Yet, as the fleet took its place in the void before them, all they could do was stare in disbelief. Earth had shown no signs of overt aggression, no military buildup to match the rumors, no endless construction of weapons. In fact, it looked like the fleet consisted of nothing more than small, unmarked ships, their technology primitive by galactic standards. And yet, they were here. No one had dared to ask how Earth had gotten this far, how their ships were able to bypass the most sophisticated detection systems in the galaxy. It didn't matter anymore. The fleet was here. And in its wake, the galaxy was beginning to realize that they had vastly underestimated humanity. The ships didn't immediately dock with the council chambers. They didn't need to. The humans were letting their presence speak for itself. But as the fleet hovered, unmoving, the feeling of dread began to settle in. This wasn't an invasion. This wasn't even a negotiation. Earth had come to remind the galaxy of one simple truth. Humans never forgot how to survive. The galaxy's leaders gathered around a holographic projection, their voices laced with uncertainty. They had spent years building alliances, advancing technology, creating weapons of unimaginable power. Yet here were these small, seemingly insignificant ships, no larger than a few dozen civilian transports, floating in front of them like a threat that none could measure. The humans had always been underestimated. This was their greatest weapon, their greatest gift, the ability to adapt, to evolve, to overcome the impossible. And now, that gift had come to bear. A human ambassador, her face calm, emotionless, stepped forward. She wasn't accompanied by an army, a fleet, or any visible support. Her presence alone was enough to send ripples through the room. It was clear now that the galaxy was facing something beyond technology, beyond military strategy. The human ambassador carried something more dangerous, the sheer will to defy the odds. "Council," she began, her voice steady and unyielding. "We've seen your actions. We've heard your words. And we've come to remind you that the rules of this galaxy no longer apply. We've learned how to survive in ways none of you have ever imagined." Her words hung in the air, each syllable a challenge to the galaxy's power structures, to the belief that only the strongest, the most advanced civilizations had the right to dictate the future. "Earth's strength isn't in our weapons," she continued, "nor is it in our fleets. It's in our people, our ability to adapt to any situation, to innovate and outlast anything the galaxy can throw at us. We've learned to build from nothing, to thrive in environments where others would falter. And we've learned to do it alone." The council sat in stunned silence. It wasn't the fear of weapons or soldiers that gripped them. It was the realization that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. It was fighting for the future. The human ambassador's presence was a stark reminder that Earth had never truly been defeated. While the galaxy focused on the external, Earth had quietly been evolving, preparing, and building a society capable of thriving in even the harshest of conditions. "I know you have questions," the ambassador continued, her gaze sweeping over the chamber. "But the most important one is this. Will you adapt with us, or will you be left behind? Earth is no longer interested in your politics. We are interested in the future, and that future will be built by those who can learn to evolve with us." The ambassadors of the other races exchanged nervous glances. They had heard rumors of Earth's growing power, but they had dismissed them as exaggerations. The truth was now undeniable. Humanity was no longer a minor player in the galactic scene. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that operated outside the rules everyone else had adhered to for centuries. "You've forgotten rule number 1, the ambassador said again, the words echoing in the minds of everyone present. "It's not about the strongest fleet or the largest army. It's about the will to survive, the will to adapt, to push through every obstacle until there is nothing left to stop you." At that moment, the ambassador's message was clear. Earth wasn't coming to negotiate. They were coming to lead. And those who couldn't keep up would be left in the dust. The council leaders remained silent, their minds racing, weighing the implications of the ambassador's words. The galaxy had always prided itself on its power, its technology, its military superiority. But humanity's arrival had changed the paradigm completely. This wasn't a threat of destruction. It was a declaration of intent. Earth was no longer just a survivor. They were a force capable of reshaping the galaxy. And in that silence, the galaxy knew that things would never be the same again. Earth had woken up. The rules had changed. And those who failed to adapt would learn the hard way that humanity's greatest power wasn't its technology. It was its relentless ability to survive.